Hey everybody, this is Glidercat and it's time to play. I've partnered with Ben from Never Games Limited and today we're going to take a look at a huge update that's just been released for Final Factory called the Overdrive update. I also have a brand new Let's Play featuring Final Factory that will begin posting within a couple days, so stay tuned for that as well. Now, as always, I'll put links to the Steam page, Discord, and all that stuff in the description. And with the launch of the Overdrive update, Final Factory is on sale right now with a huge discount of 40% off. So that makes it an awesome time to jump in if you haven't played before. If you're new to Final Factory, let's take a few minutes to go over what this game is all about. I'll put chapters in so you can skip ahead of this section if you're already well familiar with the game, and then after this overview, we'll go over the new features in the Overdrive update. So Final Factory is a factory builder set in space where you mine asteroids for raw resources and then process those resources into ever more advanced materials and components. It's currently a single player game, but multiplayer support is in the works, so we should see that at some point down the road. Now you conduct research, work your way through an extensive tech tree, and win the game by successfully building a dark stargate and launching a singularity vessel through a black hole.
A Leviathan lurks somewhere in this space. Build the Dark Star Gate and send more of you through into the unknown, so that we may continue the great assimilation of the universe.
Now you can continue after that, but it's kind of the big goal that you're shooting for when you first set out and start building your factories. Now there's a few things that set Final Factory apart from other automation games. Since you're out in space, your factories take the form of space stations. You can build these stations any size you want, and you can also move them around, which is very cool. For example, you might build a station to mine asteroids. Well, once the asteroid that you're mining is depleted, you can just move that station over to a new asteroid. You will, however, need to protect your station from enemy attacks as you're moving it through space to the next asteroid, but we'll get to more on that later. Now, in addition to managing power, as your factories get larger and larger, you need to keep an eye on the structural stability of your stations as well as their heat output. And with the new Overdrive update, there's also a new game mechanic that functions a little like the pollution mechanic does in Factorio. In Final Factory, many of your buildings generate signal while they're operating and only while they're operating. The more buildings you have operating at the same time, the further that signal will reach out into space. Now, once that signal reaches out to where enemies are on the map, you can expect an incoming attack from those enemies on your base. And a new feature's been added to the map so you can see how your signal is propagating out from your stations. And as you see here, it kind of looks a little bit like the pollution dynamic in Factorio. Now, along with the new signal mechanic, the Overdrive update brings a new structure called signal dampeners, which reduce the signal your station emits, but they do come at a cost, and they will slow the operation of your station a bit. So you kind of need to balance all these things. As you build out your ever-growing factories, you'll be balancing stability, heat, power, and signal. And then there's a whole mess of different strategies you can deploy for doing that. We won't go into those here, but that's where a lot of the fun comes from in this game, is managing those things as you build out your kind of mega factories in the form of space stations. Now, moving on, one of my favorite features of Final Factory is the ability to build custom spaceships. And what makes it so cool is that beyond just building them and flying them around manually, which you can do, you can also automate routes for them. So for example, you might build yourself a battle cruiser complete with lasers and spacecraft hangars for defenses and attack, and then set that battle cruiser up to patrol the perimeter of your factory automatically, taking out enemies whenever and wherever they are encountered. You can also set up automated routes for your custom-built cargo ships to pick up ores from mining stations and then deliver those ores to your production facilities. So check this footage out here. I've got my cargo ship. It's getting ready to dock at my bauxite mining station. I've got a couple cargo drones there loading up my mining ship with bauxite ore. And once this guy's filled up, this is running on an automated script. Once my cargo ship fills up here, it is going to make its way back to my production facilities, dock over here, and then start unloading that bauxite into my factory. So that's just one easy example of how you could set up cargo ship logistics. This guy's not traveling a super far distance, but you can imagine if you wanted to keep your production facilities centralized on the map, you could send these cargo ships out pretty far have them automated. You can see this one's got tons of defenses on it. And then you've got automated delivery of your ores. So pretty cool functionality there. I really, really like the ability to automate the routes in Final Factory. Now, as I mentioned, Final Factory does have enemies, but you can tone them down in the settings and make them a bit more passive if you wish. I don't believe you can completely get rid of them, but you can make them quite a bit easier to deal with. And with enemies around, you'll need to protect your cargo routes with either stationary space defense platforms or equip your cargo ships with their own defenses so they can kind of fend for themselves while they're out and about. Because you're not going to be watching them if you automate them. Or you don't have to use cargo ships at all. You can use some other logistic strategy that avoids that. So in Final Factory, there's no one optimal way to play it, which I love, so that you can let your creativity run wild and play it your way. You could go with huge stations and deal with all the heat and stability issues that come along with that. Or you could go with a whole bunch of little stations, kind of sending resources to each other and work through those logistics. So lots and lots of opportunities, which I kind of love experimenting with. And you can also build Dyson spheres in Final Factory. We won't get into those. You can kind of guess what that's all about, but there are Dyson spheres in Final Factory. So that's the game in a nutshell. Now let's transition into what's been added in the Overdrive update specifically. First, there's been a huge focus on rebalancing the early game. Now, previously, it could be a bit tough to manage the heat, stability, and power of your stations when you were just getting started. Those factors are still present. You're still going to have to keep those in mind and balance them, and there's all kinds of means in the game for you to do that. But those requirements have been relaxed quite a bit in the early game, so you've got a lot more freedom in how you build out your first stations. Now, another big new feature is the addition of mass drivers, which add a ton of flexibility and new possibilities to your logistics setups. Before the update, logistics were largely managed by a combination of inserter bots and cargo drones. Inserter bots are kind of short-range transport of resources, lower throughput, and cargo drones are longer distance and more throughput. But those two structures, they're still in the game and they still have their uses, but they only function at 90-degree angles. So there's some limitations on how you can lay out your factories and your production buildings leveraging the inserter bots and the cargo drones. With mass drivers, you can route your logistics in pretty much any direction you want. You want to send them on a 45-degree angle, a 37-degree angle, wherever you need to send materials from point A to point B, you can probably do with mass drivers. Now, the materials you transport with mass drivers will simply fly over any other factory structures on the way to their destination, which provides a ton of new flexibility that we didn't have before. So better than underground belts in Factorio, better than, other systems for moving items around. These things are super duper flexible. Now, they do consume power and they make use of capacitors to charge up and fire. And they fire batches of resources from one mass driver to another across your factory. They also do have limited range, but you can set these up in a chain and traverse long distances with them if you want, or you can shoot resources over to one of the existing cargo drones and use those for long distance transport. You got lots of options. Now, there's also a higher tier version of mass drivers that you'll get to further down the tech tree, and those will give you more than double the throughput of the first mass drivers that you unlock early on, but they are super duper powerful. As I mentioned, you still have the cargo drones and inserter bots, but there's a very good chance that mass drivers are going to take center stage in your logistics setups just due to the flexibility that they give you. So I mentioned that mass drivers make use of capacitors for power. So what are capacitors? Well, as you might have guessed, they're simply accumulators or batteries that store electric charge. Mass drivers make use of them, as I mentioned, and now with the Overdrive update, lasers make use of capacitors as well. Lasers used to work just on any kind of fuel. You just pump any kind of material in the game into the lasers and they would generate energy and fire. But now you've got to use capacitors. So here's a shot of my battlecruiser, and on my battlecruiser, I loaded up on capacitors because I have tons of lasers on this ship, and I make sure my capacitors are fully charged before I go into battle. Because the more charge I have stored up in capacitors, the longer I can stay in the fight. And some of the enemy encampments that you want to clear, they get pretty big. So you're going to want a lot of charge on hand rather than just trying to generate that electricity on the fly as you're fighting. A last note on capacitors. The developers mentioned that he plans to make capacitors a more integral part of the mid and late game factory design. He didn't go into a lot of details, so we'll have to wait for future updates to see what shape that takes. But you can expect as more updates come out, capacitors are going to have a larger role in the game. Again, we'll see what that is. Now, there's a bunch more things in the Overdrive update, but I can't cover all of them in this video. However, there's one more big feature that I do want to cover, and that's overdrivers. That's like kind of like the name of the update. So overdrivers are a brand new structure that you can add to your stations, and they'll enhance the production speed of all the machines on the station that they're attached to. They'll also increase the vision range of your station, so that's how far you can see into the fog of war. And they also increase the firing speed of any mass drivers you've got on the station that you're going to attach them to. Now, overdrivers, they generate heat, and the amount of heat scales up with the size of the station that they are connected to. So if you connect them to a huge station with a bunch of production machines on it attached to that same station, you're going to have to mitigate a lot of new heat that comes with adding the overdrivers in order to keep your station operating. They're also set up to have diminishing returns. So the more of them you add to any given station, the more costly they are. So they're super powerful, but you can't just spam them. Or you can spam them, but you got to mitigate the heat and make sure you got a lot of power generation on that station. Now, like I said, there's a lot more features in the Overdrive update than I can cover here, but those are the big ones I wanted to showcase. If you want to learn more of the details of the Overdrive update, definitely hop on the Steam page for more information, and also hop on the Discord. The Discord, by the way, for Final Factory, and there's links in the description for this. It might just be the most helpful and responsive Discord that I've ever been on. And I've literally been on hundreds of game-specific Discords at this point. So if you have any questions about Final Factory, whether you currently own the game or you're thinking about picking it up, I highly recommend hopping on the Discord and asking the community any questions that you might have about it. They have been super, super, super helpful to me. It's been amazing, actually. Very, very cool. Check that out. Okay, so that's an overview of Final Factory, and that's an overview of what's come in the Overdrive update. It just released today as this video is posting, so you can check that out. So now I thought it might be cool at the end of the video here to just show you a few of the mega bases that other players have put together. Let's take a look at some of these. And I'll leave it here so you can just check out these awesome, awesome bases built by other players. I'll see you all in the next one.